now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 29 through 38C from the Department of Transportation. Please just note that item 32 is not being used. We have a motion. Is there a second? Any discussion on any of these items from DOT? We do have a question on item 30 of someone from DOT. Join us. Question on item 30. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Marie Mullen, Director of Finance from the Department of Transportation.
Good morning. That is a issue. I just want to make sure that the letter of the task force, petition where it says funds are available for Exit 4A, I have not seen that.
Yes, I do know that that was in the works. It may be with the Commissioner for signature, but I do know that they were working on that, and they are planning to get back to you.
And it'll be part of the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, I believe for the gas meeting is what they were planning on, yes.
Because there's a meeting tomorrow night at Exit 4A together. I was hoping that it would be available now.
I will follow up, and I will get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Stephen?
So there are two funding sources for 4A, the 10-year plan, and STIP. And is STIP factored into the current 10-year plan at this point in the overall figures, or is it still being kept separate?
Can I ask what you're referencing?
In regards to 4A, in the letter from Commissioner Sheehan dated October 26, she states that there are two funding sources for 4A, and that being the 10-year plan, and the other being statewide transportation improvement program. So I don't have the dollar value.
Right, those are internal documents that one is for 10 years, the STIP is a 4-year plan. So the funds are included in there, but the program is funded with federal funds. So those are not two different funding sources. It's actually, we have to do a 4-year financially constrained plan for the federal government, and then we have our state 10-year plan,
Right.
and it's included in both.
It is, okay.
Yes.
So we saw 460,000 increase since 6/29, and that was largely attributed to a building demolition.
Was that a question? I think she was saying, was that attributed to the building demo?
To the building demolition.
I would have to check on that. I'm not certain what that increase may have been since June. I can check and follow up with you.
Yeah, it's showing 460,000 since 6/29.
Okay. I can check on that and get back to you.
Thank you.
And I would just add, if there were additional costs there, do they basically come out of the contingency? Because a lot of the DOT contracts are built in contingency. So is it truly additional cost above what was approved, or is it simply those come out of the contingency, but they're off the contract?
Yeah, if we've gone out to bid, that would be part of the contingency for a scope change. But prior to going out to bid, we would identify funds within the plan to be able to fund those increases. We've identified those increases.
Thank you.
Additional questions from DOT? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of items 29 through 38C, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Those items are approved. We do have a late item A from the Department of Transportation. So I would ask everyone to take a look at the late item A, and if I could get a motion to adopt. So while the council is taking a look, if someone from DOT could come up and give us a verbal description of late item A, what it is, why it's late, that would be probably very helpful.
members of the council. I'm Patrick Hurley, Director of Aeronautics General Transit at DOT. This late item is to use Federal Aviation Administration funding, both through the Airport Improvement Program and through ARPA, to purchase a aircraft rescue firefighter training vehicle, fire truck, for the Aircraft Rescue Firefighter Training Facility over on Smoky Bear Boulevard. The reason it's a late item is the FAA funding for the Airport Improvement Program is a discretionary fund, and so we have to apply for that funding and wait for FAA to decide whether or not they're going to award a grant for that. Prior to submitting the application, we need to go out to bid to get prices so that our grant application is tied to that bid. The bids were done back in April. We had a 6-month window for where the vendor would need to honor that bid. That expires on October 31st of this year. We talked to the vendor. The vendor was not willing to extend that bid past October 31st. But we did not hear from the FAA on this grant award until later than when they normally award grants. We didn't get the grant awarded until the end of August. Then we had to start the contracting process, and the company, E1, had to start their registration process with the Secretary of State.
Any questions from the council, Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Joe. Director, we spoke on the phone the other day about this ARFF vehicle, and you mentioned that it's true that we have to swap in the old vehicle as part of the trade-in to get the new vehicle.
We don't have to. We are trading in the new vehicle to reduce the cost of the new vehicle, so that there's a reduction in that cost. But there are also restrictions with that vehicle because it was purchased with FAA funding.
Okay. The North Country Fire Academy in Bethlehem is looking for a fire truck so that he can train on.
I would talk to the fire academy.
Yeah, the fire academy. We need someone to come through for us. But anyway, thank you for that information.
Thank you, Councilor.
Any other questions on this late item? Yes, I apologize. So, can I get a motion to adopt late item A from the Department of Transportation? Sorry, thank you.
Second.
A motion and second. Any further discussion? Sorry about that. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of late item A, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Late item A is approved.
Thank you.
Moving on, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the agenda items 39, 40, and 41 from the New Hampshire Governor's Commission on Disabilities. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. See you, John. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 42 from the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 43 from the Department of Revenue Administration.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 43 is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 44 and 45 from the Department of Information Technology.
So moved.
Any discussion? Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Governor. I noticed, Governor, that a lot of these contracts are contingent upon fiscal committee approval on October 22nd. Am I to assume, if that's correct, that all the items that went before the fiscal committee on October 22nd have been approved, and therefore they remain on the agenda? How does that work?
Yes. Well, I believe so. I can ask the Commissioner Joe Bouchard to answer, but I believe everything that has pre-fiscal committee approval, because the agenda is not on the date of the fiscal committee meeting, but I believe all these items have been approved by the fiscal committee.
I just wanted to
Yes,
check.
it's very good.
You're going to sit down. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. I will now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 46 from the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification.
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 46 is approved. Could I get a motion to adopt agenda item 47 from the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food?
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Councilor Wither? I think the commissioner's here.
Good morning, Commissioner. I'd like to just get a little more information on what we're getting here for $500,000 and exactly what the specific problem is alleged to be that we're addressing, and some numbers to see, how many people would be served by this $500,000.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, but one that I can't specifically answer because this is going to be a program that is going to depend on the outreach. So the federal government made available to each state $500,000 for this program. So California is eligible for the same amount that we are, a rather unusual situation. This was brought to our attention by staff at Cooperative Extension, suggested that we apply for it as they could not. But there are a lot of stress factors out there, and certainly we're losing a number of farms for a variety of reasons. So this money can be divided up in a number of key areas. Some of it is mental health. A lot of it has to do with the stress that is caused by perhaps poor or inadequate financial planning. And there's quite a bit of expertise in Cooperative Extension on the financial planning for farms, helping them, do a better job. Farmers tend to work, and don't take the time to look at the long-range plans because they simply don't have the time, and in many cases don't have the expertise. So this is going to give us the ability to do that. So obviously Cooperative Extension is out there working with the vast majority of our farms to begin with, so they will be working with them in many of these ways. And as you see in here, this is a multi-agency effort, so there's going to be a lot of outreach. Hopefully this will be approved and we'll be able to take this money that's been made available to us to help relieve many of the factors that are leading to stress in farming, and that can include succession planning, which is a huge issue for many of our farms.
Well, when the staff doesn't come, it's very special.
It certainly is, and there's not much we can do about the weather, I'm afraid.
So, another question. So we really don't even know if we have a problem.
Well, we know intuitively that we do have these problems. Certainly, we are aware of those. We don't know specifically what the breakdown is, how many there are. Again, this was an opportunity made available to us, and it was a rather tight timeline to get things together. Again, as I always say, Cooperative Extension is really our sister organization. We're more regulatory, and they provide the education and the on-farm training and contract with them in many areas. And so, we do believe that, this will be very beneficial to many farmers in the state of New Hampshire.
I guess I just want to comment that I don't think this item has been very well thought out. It seems like, here's some money, go figure it out, and I just can't support this item without knowing a lot more about what's going to happen. I don't know what, we don't even know what the outreach is going to look like. We're paying someone to figure out what outreach looks like, but it doesn't seem $500,000 complicated. So I can't support this.
Counselor, I'm sorry to hear that. I understand. Unfortunately, the federal government didn't give us a lot of time. There is an end date to this, so by the time we might have been able to do the things you're requesting, it probably would have been impossible to actually carry out the provision. So I understand where you're coming from, but given how the federal government put this forward, every state is in the same boat on this. We need to do the best we can with the money that was offered to us from the federal government.
Well, I guess I got one further question. Because this says this is about farmer suicide. Do we have any statistics on farmer-specific suicide?
That is part of it. We haven't thankfully had a lot in New Hampshire. We have had farm suicides in New Hampshire in recent years. But it's not just about suicide, it's about taking those mental stresses off of people to prevent that. And that's all we can do. I mean, once somebody's committed suicide, it's a little bit too late. So we have to really get out there, recognize, and hopefully those farms recognize those stresses. And again, in New Hampshire particularly, many of them are mental stresses caused by financial problems, and as you said, the sap running. This year we had a great deal of crop loss because of the excess rain. I mean, look, you go into farming and, you're at the Lord's mercy, and it's not something you can really plan on. And so we just see this as, it would have been, in my opinion, it would have been irresponsible of us to say, well, we can't get every last detail out there in a timely nature, so we're just going to ignore it. I think that would have been more irresponsible.
So, could I go to Constitution issue?
So I would imagine labor issues have been a huge challenge for New Hampshire farms.
Yes, they certainly are.
And one of the biggest challenges has been J-1 visas, correct?
That has been a challenge. I think we worked through that by the end of the season. It was certainly a big challenge at the beginning of the year.
I have orchards in my district that they were struggling to stay afloat because they had no assurances at the time that their staff who would work for them year after year were going to be able to get their J-1 visa. So that stress must be off the charts.
That has certainly been a big issue, and one of the problems, even with the foreign workers coming in on these programs, is that just like our society is aging, so are many of the societies that our workers are coming from. And so, as you say, these are workers that come year after year, but eventually they get to retirement, and there are fewer workers coming in behind them. So it's a challenge everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, I just had a couple of questions. So this is federal funding. Is this a one-year program?
It is, and you see it has an end date on it in 22.
Okay, and my follow-up question is your understanding that you would like to maybe go back to the legislature to sustain this program and come in with general funds?
We have not had that discussion, and I think as Councilor Wheeler has pointed out, we don't know what the demands are going to be. So there might be a possibility of doing that, depending on what we find as we get out there. This is essentially going to be a good pilot program. We have not had discussions around that because we have no idea what the demands are going to actually look like.
And so with that discussion that you've had out there at this point, you had no contact with our own behavioral health network within state government over this particular population of people in the farming community?
No, and I would expect they wouldn't have much information because farmers tend to pretty much keep to themselves on these things and are not a population that, in my experience, has really reached out there. A lot of it does become internal, and the good thing about running this program through cooperative extension is these are people they already work with, people they know, people they trust. And so that outreach is going to come to them from people that they already have a great deal of level of comfort with.
And lastly, will we get a kind of if this contract is supported and moves forward, will we get some type of report at the end of it to say this is what's going on in the farming community with mental health?
We can certainly do that, and I think that is a very good request, and I will follow up on that and make sure that that happens. And it should be easy to do because that will track as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on this item? Joe? Okay.
Just a technical matter, sir, before you ask for a vote. Joe Bouchard, Administrative Services. There's a typo on the agenda. We'll ask you to make it August of 22 and not 21.
Exactly. So I believe the contract was written correctly, but the agenda before you does say it goes through August of 2021. With the typo being, it should be August of 2022. But the contract was written correctly. So all in favor of this item, item 47, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The item is approved. I now ask a motion to adopt agenda item 48 from New Hampshire Employment Security.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No vote, the item is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 49 from the Judicial Council.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 50, agenda item 50 from the Department of Corrections.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No vote, item 50 is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 51 through 58 from the Department of Energy.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on any of these items? Okay, all in favor of these items, 51 through 58, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Moving to no on item 52, the items are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 59 and 60 from the New Hampshire Banking Department.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items from the banking department are approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 61 through 72 from the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or questions for Guilford? Councilor Warren. I think the Commissioner Caswell. Please go for two.
Hello, Commissioner. My question is about the language included in items 64, 66, 67, 68, 71, and 72, that these funds are going to be accepted without further approval and waive MOM 155A6. Just wondering, I looked back through the agendas since the beginning of COVID. I did not find any similar language. I'm just wondering why we have this language here before us.
So this is an attempt at efficiency, primarily, in the sense that programs that those items are associated with will have a number of other, basically awards that will come, whether it's for local governments or for shelters or for senior centers, all of which the contracts will be identical and exactly the same. The The names of those that are on the contract obviously will be different, and we have proposed that we would be able to effectively approve the template that we would use for these contracts, and that we would provide the council the names of those that have been awarded those contracts as a result of the program after the fact.
So, for instance, when there were funds available for municipalities, it was really by the act of the council that we discovered very close to the deadline that lots of municipalities were misinformed and didn't think they had any use for those ARPA funds and weren't applying for them. And the council was instrumental in making sure that every city and town did apply. I am concerned that, one, there's a lack of transparency here, that this information wouldn't be before the council in advance, and two, that there may be misinformation or missed opportunities where we want to talk to our constituents and we won't have that opportunity.
So, a couple of things. First off, with regard to the program you're mentioning, the original non-entitlement unit program, those were not funds that the state was awarding to those communities. Those were funds that we effectively served as a pass-through. So they just needed to raise their hand and say, we wanted to get the resources. So in the sense of a contractual relationship, there is none between the state and those communities. I would say, to your other point, the known universe of the recipients of these programs, the shelters, the senior centers, the long-term care centers, and the localities, we know who is eligible for this program that was designed specifically for those entities. And we have had a relationship with them going back through CARES Act, now 18 months plus ago. So in those respects, it's just a matter of us connecting with those known entities and alerting them to this. There will be information on our website, all the applications will be online, all those sort of things. So it's not that different from previous programs. It's just that as it relates specifically to the CARES Act component of these, we have until December 31st to get these funds to those organizations. So there is a bit of an efficiency and speed that we need in order to make sure that we deploy those resources in the CARES Act by the end of the year. So that's really the reason why this unique arrangement admittedly has been requested.
I really have to say that the trade-off of efficiency versus transparency could an argument that could be made for everything on our agenda. And I'm concerned about the lack of transparency here and would ask, what would you do to address that?
I'm sorry.
The lack of transparency for the council to bring these things so that we can see what happened or happens.
Well, we're certainly willing to come up with a timing when we get applications in and how we transmit that to the council. But I think in terms of having to have a contractual approval for each one of these items, and there would be, conceptually several hundred of these items that we would need to move for one at a time, that would all have almost identical components to their contracts.
So I see several of these items are CARES Act funds, and so all of these have to be expended before December 31st?
All the CARES Act funds, yes.
And the 71 and 72 are not CARES Act, they are ARPA funds.
That's correct.
So do they have a longer timeline on them?
They do.
So why are we asking for that? Are you asking for that exception?
I think we're just recognizing that this is not exclusively a time issue for all of the funds, but that there are similar situations where we will have several dozens of applications and contracts that would be identical. And so we're just trying to make that process of moving federal dollars to these entities as efficient as we possibly can and walk that line, obviously, of transparency with the council. So that's our request.
Understood.
Governor, I guess my question is for the Attorney General, because what we're doing with the words without further approval and waiving them off is saying these items are not coming back to the Executive Council. We all can't make sure our districts get a fair shake in the overall amount of spending. So the question is the question divisible, where we can approve these items but not approve the language without further approval?
I'd have to take a look at one of the items. I'm just not sure.
I would also note that some of these items say that these are effective through June of 2022, even though they're CARES Act funds.
There is a distinction between when the funds have to be obligated and when they have to actually wrap up in terms of being able to spend it towards themselves.
You know, my sense is that in some cases you may, in order to make sure those funds don't, get lapsed, you may have to do something and notify us retroactively, and that certainly happens from time to time. It's not preferable that it happens, but they would still come back to us, even as a retroactive item. And then other items which are not under that same timeline, there's ample time to bring them back to us.
Further discussion, Councilor Stevens, did you have your hand?
I have another question on that.
Of course.
At the last meeting, we approved items 44K and 44L. Those are grant programs, some for municipalities, some for other programs. I asked if you could provide the council with information about the application process and the deadline. And I'm asking if I haven't received anything. I'm just asking if you have any information.
Those programs are being launched this week. So, and with regard to those and the others that we've mentioned, the shelter program, the senior program, long-term care program, and I believe one or two others will be launched this week. We are planning to provide the council with all of the information on the applications and the deadlines and where people need to go to apply for those once they're up. But I believe maybe one or two of them are up already. And the rest of them will be up by the end of this week.
Yeah, so I think the items themselves are essentially requests for these waivers. So if you don't want to grant this waiver, there's really not much else to grant. So there really isn't a question. There's nothing that can be defined.
These could come back.
Yeah, they could bring back the individual grant agreements, but they're essentially what this item is a request for a waiver as applied to this chunk of money. Grant agreements. So if you don't approve, if you're not willing to approve the waiver, there's not really anything else before you.
So if I could ask a question, specifically to the CARES Act, and the CARES Act stuff I think is what I'm most concerned with because the clock is ticking. We got like 60 days here, and we're just trying to, and I really appreciate, I think you guys have done a great job trying to get as much of this money that was unexpended out as fast as possible. So to these programs, if we weren't to go forward with the way the Attorney General is describing it, with this kind of blanket waiver on these things, prior to the grants being awarded, could we still do it? Like, there's potentially a lot of awardees here. Would it just be too much to be able to get it out by December 31st, get the awards out, and get the expenditures where they need to happen? Because you're talking about, especially if I made the food pantry ones, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of food pantries that stand to gain grants. Is that possible? I think that's. I just want to be clear. I think you're absolutely right, Counselor. Like, I am concerned with the transparency aspect as well. But would the time crunch basically mean? And I apologize, I'm speaking in half sentences. I feel like I'm talking like my kids tweet and text with no punctuation. But if the dollars, just so everyone's clear, what dollars do not get expended by December 31st will waterfall into the trust fund, the unemployment trust fund. That's our backup. We want to, our unemployment trust fund is, as noted earlier, is managed really, really well. And while it's great to have more money in there, that is not the top priority, right? Getting the dollars out of it. So we're not going to lose the money. but we also want to get it out. So my biggest concern is that we don't miss the opportunity to get it out. But can it be done, I guess, is my biggest question.
Yes, Governor, I would be concerned with the sheer number of contracts and applicants that are coming under the CARES Act components of this, which are, again, long-term care, the food program, the senior centers, and the homeless shelters. We are rapidly approaching November. The process of standing up an application, an online system, I mentioned we've been working behind the scenes to have that ready to go as soon as we get some sort of flag to be able to initiate those programs. But getting that out, getting that outreach, as you mentioned, Councilor, to all of those organizations, making sure that they understand what they're applying for and how their COVID-related expenses can be eligible, and have that all done with checks effectively out the door by the end of December is a very tight time frame. And we are trying to, as the Governor mentioned, get those resources spent down as low as we possibly can before that end date where we waterfall the remaining into the trust fund.
I'm going to go to Councilor Kennedy, and we'll come back around.
So I'm just thinking out loud, that might be good or bad, but I want you to respond. So we've had bundled contracts, so you could put 100 contracts into one document. You can bundle it and you look at the dollar amount as long as it's in each category. Are you now suggesting that the best that we can hope for transparency is maybe what we did during the emergency period of state government when we had informational documentation on our council agendas? Because I agree with my fellow councilor here. We need to advocate for our districts, and we need to be transparent. We don't know what you're doing over there if you're just spending money and it's flying out left and right.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to ask Chase to step in on some of these. Chase Hagan is our deputy director and has been really sort of on the ground day to day putting these together and operating the programs. But I would say, to regard to that, I'm going to go back to the fact that we do know who the eligible applicants are for at least the CARES Act components of this request. So we can provide the list of who's eligible, and we can work with councilors and others to make sure that the outreach is happening. But I guess what we're requesting in this instance is that to the extent that these contracts are going to all be really almost identical, just a different name in each one of them, rather than having to ask for individual approval for each one of those items, is to be able to do that in this manner. Do you want to add that? Yes.
So can I just add to that, just before you step away? You know who's eligible. We don't know who's eligible. And what we need to know is maybe we just need to know where the money's going and that we approve it. From my standpoint, from my district. So I'm not concerned about eligibility. I'm concerned about where the money's going.
Right. And I'm certainly, becoming a bit more of an expert on the process of all of the council's procedures that they use. If there is some other way that we can do and achieve what I'm trying to describe here in a way that meets the goals of the council, I'm certainly very open to any of those kinds of discussions. I'm just trying to make sure that we're able to get these resources to these individual organizations within the deadlines that we're being held to by the federal government.
Thank you, Governor. Council. I'm Chase Hagan, Deputy Director at Gopher. I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification. On the transparency piece, we have no interest in hiding the ball in any regard with regard to these programs or where the money is going. In fact, the CRF programs, the funding for these programs has already been approved by the council and we've gone through fiscal, so the amount of money going to this specific purpose has already been approved. These requests are about the back end, the agreements, the templates that we're putting forward on the actual contract that has to be engaged in. On the transparency piece, we're more than happy to provide informational items on who ends up qualifying for awards and what the award is. There will be FAQs on the website outlining all the eligibilities, many of the expenses that are permitted, a whole bevy of information related to each program, again, that we'll make available to you and stakeholders to get the information and word out. When it comes to the timing of all this, to the governor's point, These are all, I think it's important to remember, these are all applications. There's an application period that goes with each program, and some of the application periods run into December. So awards, the point with CARES Act is the funds have to be obligated, the contracts entered into, the award made by the end of the year. But the money doesn't necessarily have to go out the door before the end of the year. It has to be obligated. So these programs run into December to give entities time to put forward the applications and the information they need to justify the expenses. So there is a very real concern about taking these several programs that are CRS funded, engaging in the application review process, issuing awards, and then having to come back for approval of the awards through council before the end of December. There is a process at issue.
If I may, the analogy I would give is, for example, when we created the Main Street Relief Fund last year, if there wasn't, we did through executive order, obviously, we could an emergency or some state of emergency, we could go very quickly. But in that case, we would have had to bring 5,000 agreements back to the council, right? Because like literally thousands and thousands of businesses, we see pieces of that $400 million in the self-employment fund, the nonprofit fund. So what if I could go, I'm just throwing out spitballing suggestions here. They will apply through this program. If this were to move forward, they apply through the program. The awardees, we internally decide and can figure out who's applicable, and those that are applicable get a portion of the funds. Would it be possible to come back and at least let the council know who the awardees are before the cash awards are actually sent out the door? Not necessarily for approval, but at least for an informational purpose, because then councilors will know what's going on in their district, who got what, because every once in a while, as you all know, we'll get a call about an organization who thinks they should have qualified but didn't, and we have to go through and explain why maybe they didn't, or maybe something was filled out wrong. I imagine the councilors could get questions like that, and at least make sure that they're involved in that aspect of the process, because even once dollars are awarded, there is still we will still have an appeal process, I assume?
There is an appeal process, Governor, and to your point, yes, absolutely, that information can be provided. Once an application period closes and the applications are reviewed and the universe of who would be eligible in receiving funds, that list can be made available, especially if, advocating here, especially if these templates are approved, because that means they're in a contractual agreement, the funds will go to them. So once that step is made, then that information can be provided. Otherwise, if there isn't an agreement already in force, it may be a little premature because we have to bring the agreement to council for approval, and if it's denied, then the funds will be available.
Councilor Gann.
Thank you, Governor. We have 2 meetings in December, and they provide a list by district of the folks that are eligible for the funds, so that we can take a look at it. Then you have at least a month to be able to change some of those ideas. I think the council is more concerned with where's the money going. Certainly I trust Taylor Caswell to distribute the money clearly. But one council may think it's fair, another one may think it's unfair. So it's a matter of where's the money going, not who you're giving it to, but just what district it's in. I think that's what the council is concerned.
So you're asking for an update at the 2 December meetings as to who is eligible under the programs, under the CARES Act programs we're
At
talking
least the first council meeting, so that we can be prepared and it can be on the agenda, so that we can see it.
about. Absolutely.
Just to be clear, so what you're saying is you could do that in the first council meeting and then still have enough time to get all of that process in the 2 weeks before, in the week before Christmas, and still get out the door. I'm just nervous because now you're going to be really under a time crunch.
What I'm hearing is that you're requesting a list of eligible organizations under the CARES Act programs that are listed here that we know of that will be receiving direct outreach from us as part of their application process. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
We could, I mean,
And for providing that by council district, I think is just a matter of a spreadsheet.
Well, and the amount of money that they're looking for.
But the amount of money will be different. The amount of money is really dependent on what their COVID-related expenses are. And so that won't be known until we get much closer to the...
And I don't even know if that can be made public. We have to be careful
Oh,
of that,
right, yeah.
because that's financial information, and that I don't think we can
We
disclose.
know what they're requesting.
Possibly. Sorry.
Go right ahead.
Sorry, so Counselor, it's entirely possible we wouldn't know the request until much later in December because some of these applications some are December 15th, some may have a reopening period if all the funds are not expended because they're a pro rata cap-based fund. So there's a little bit of complexity to try and make sure the funds are getting out the door to everyone that needs it before the end of the year. But I think, to the Commissioner's point, a preliminary list of who we believe is eligible under these programs can be provided to the council, but we wouldn't know exactly what they're asking for in terms of reimbursement for COVID-related expenses until they submit their application. To the Governor's point, that would be, I think, protected financial information until an award is made.
So Steve?
So there's somewhere between 35 to 39 million remaining in CARES.
That is no longer the case after the council meeting on the 13th and the fiscal meeting on the 22nd. These funds have already been approved for these programs.
So what is the balance? Will we know? Will we spend everything down with these?
That is to be determined based on the success of some of these programs and what might remain after, if anything.
Okay. Our nonprofits are struggling with staff, as is everyone in the state, and I've never seen this, but nonprofits are turning away grants because they don't have the staff to get it done. So, anything to accelerate the process.
I think it's a further clarification from the Attorney General, because I'm trying to understand exactly what we're waiving here. If I understand it right, 155A6 is talking about entering into a memorandum of understanding that would come back, normally come back to the council. But I don't know if we're just not going to have those memorandums of understanding at all, or we're waiting that there is a memorandum, but it's just not coming back to the council.
The way I read this, there was no MOU coming back. Is that correct? That's correct in those meetings.
That's correct, Governor, and there's a draft template of what that MOU would look like, the details that would be included.
Yeah, what you're basically approving here is the ability for them to spend a certain amount of money, in one case $3.5 million, to make individual awards to whoever qualifies, amounts that qualify. And those individual awards, while they typically under 155A6 would come back to you for approval, you'd be waiving, so you're approving the block of money, but the individual awards are not approved.
So, okay, now that I get that understood, if I could understand the governor's comment, if he said bring these back to the council before you agree to spend this money. If in that point in time they know what they're going to do to bring it to us, tell us what they're going to spend. At that same point in time, why can't they bring back the MOU? So that you know more time happens.
Yeah.
I think if I understand them correctly, they're not going to know the amounts, they're going to know who is going to get them. But it's going to take almost right up to the deadline to finalize the exact amounts each awardee is going to get.
And it's retroactive approval.
Retroactive, will the dollars I see. The dollars go out and you still get to approve it retroactively. I guess the risk is if you didn't approve it, if it got shot down for some reason, then I guess we're on the line for general. I don't know how that works.
Yeah,
We'll have to ask you, we'll get the money back.
if you didn't approve it, yeah, either the money would have to come back or because money can't be expended out of treasury.
My only idea was to bring it back as an informational item, but not as complete post facto, like almost in that process. So if there was an appeals process or there's a constituent calling you, you at least have some information about who's getting funds, and that was my only thought there. But maybe I'm trying to split it too much.
And so one further clarification, we could handle 71 and 72 differently, because those two are not under a bond project?
I believe so. I think so. The 71 and 72 are with ARPA funds, and I don't think unless I'm misreading this, would not have the same time crunch as the CARES Act funds.
Yes, Governor and Council, you're correct. The timing is less of an issue there, but I think for 71 specifically, I think that's a locality matching program. There could be hundreds of applicants and contracts with that one as well. So that goes back to the Commissioner's point about an efficiency argument with these particular templates. And this isn't meant to be a sweeping request on all future programs. It's in part specific to CRF and specific to the ARPA funded programs reported today.
Any further questions? Are there more of these coming, or is this it?
Well, I mean, I believe these are programs that have been, under the microscope and approved and moving forward for funding under ARPA. I can't predict exactly what programs are going to look like over the next couple of years in each instance. I think we can certainly try to, where there are situations where we have this number of awardees under a specific program with specific components, all of which are similar, we can certainly anticipate those and treat them in this manner. But for other programs that you've already approved and that you've seen over the last couple of weeks now, sort of maintain our status quo.
Yeah, I apologize. Let me get back and correct my statement. I believe this is it for the CARES Act money that needs to get spent by the December 31st deadline. ARPA money, potentially, depending on what the government allows, I mean, you could see $100 million for potential programs, or you'll definitely see it for the capital investments and infrastructure investments that we'll be making with ARPA funds in various ways, some of the Hampton Hospital. But in terms of programs like this or grant programs, there could be a few here and there, potentially, but we don't, it's hard to say. But again, those would be more long-term without the December 31st, 2021.
So, Governor, Commissioner, what do you anticipate about the eligibility that it would be over the $10,000 or around the $10,000, which is the amount that we ask from the Governor Council?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty hearing you.
Be over $10,000 because technically that would be the council limit and potentially under. I don't know if you have any assessment on.
I don't have a guess on that.
Most would be just on the wall.
I would think most would be over $10,000 in terms of particularly code expenses, and I know that several of them have caps that are far in excess of $10,000.
Well, I certainly want to see these funds go out the door. I don't like the process here. Obviously, you've contemplated this for several weeks in order for this to be on our agenda. I would certainly advise that in the future, if you want to do things differently, you reach out to the council in advance and talk to us, have a conversation, so we're not surprised on Friday that we have to vote on something on Wednesday. But I want these funds to go out the door. I will vote in support of those items that are utilizing CARES Act with the understanding that you will promptly give us, as soon as you have it, a list of all of the eligible applicants by district. And I will not support 71 and 72 at this time. I hope to see those come back to us at the next meeting without that language.
Okay. Further discussion?
Just to understand the procedure, so 71 and 72 won't be ready to come back at the next meeting, right?
I would imagine no. But it needs to be more long-term.
The eligibility goes beyond the end of the year for most of those programs.
And they go early next year.
They can do what they need to do to bring it back to us without the vote until they're ready to come back,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes, without an affirmative vote.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So they can do the work at 71 and 72. Would we want to table, or what do you want to do to add? Do you want to make sure the language is changed?
Yeah, because it's still a paper.
Starts again. Yeah.
Councilor Stevens, did you have anything?
No.
Okay. I'm going to separate the items a little bit. All in favor of items 61 through 70, which includes all of the items that we just discussed specifically as pertains to the CARES Act funds, but not 71 and 72 as pertains to ARP funds, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. All in favor of items 71 and 72, please signify by saying aye. All opposed?
No.
And the noes have it. So 71, 72 were not approved. Okay, thank you. I'll now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 73 through 77 for the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Abstain on 75.
Any abstention on item 75? The items are approved. I'll now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 78, 79, and 80 from the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the items from Fish and Game, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. I'll now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 81 through 85 from the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources.
So moved.
Any discussion?
Just a comment, though.
Of course.
I just wanted to thank Patrick Hackley and his crew yesterday for getting me out to Forest Land for 6.5 hours worth of rain. We started at Mile Fire Tower, made our way down, and went over to Mile Lumberyard for 4, over to the Inspiring River, and go to Lollygop picnic area, and then we ate at the common forest location. So appreciate the Forest Service, the Forest Legacy folks, and every great staff that he has, and it's a wonderful tour. And I just wanted to thank the Commissioner for letting me have some of your staff and that really. Thank you.
I'll be eagerly voting for the raise. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of these items, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items are approved. I'll now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 86 through 92 from the Department of Environmental Services.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Could I get a motion to adopt agenda item 93 from the New Hampshire Lottery Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Noting the no on item 93 is approved. I now ask a motion to adopt agenda items 94 through 97A from the Department of Education.
Second.
Any discussion? Council Warmington?
For the record, Frank Aylwin, Commissioner of Education.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I have some off-agenda items to talk to you about today. I've had some requests from constituents to know, if you know yet, how many people have applied for educational savings accounts.
So I believe the number is about 1,600, but I don't have the exact number with me.
And how many approved?
I believe that's the number approved. I don't know what the number applied was.
Any idea on the average amount of
I
the...
don't have that information now. I can tell you that I will be presenting to the Legislative Oversight Committee on Education Freedom Accounts on November 9th, and we will be presenting a comprehensive analysis of all of those applications and that data.
So based on the initial 1,600, looking at 7 million or so, on average, your initial estimate was about 4,300 per grant. If it falls in that range, we're looking at about $7 million. And I believe your initial estimate to the legislature was $129,000. So just wondering, where will that deficit be made?
Yeah. So the initial estimate in terms of the number of students that would be participating in the program was derived from a similar program in Arizona, where we looked at the uptake rate of education freedom accounts in that state, and so that was the initial model that was used to forecast that. We have seen an extremely high response rate to the education freedom accounts, something that we think is both good, and a question that it raises is, why are so many students in New Hampshire responding, and families in New Hampshire responding to this particular program? Why do they think it's important for them? We do believe that COVID has some degree of effect on that, where families have been not happy with the educational environment in which they have been offered through their traditional system and are seeking something else. So again, when we come before the Legislative Committee, we'll be able to provide more details about that.
Do you think it could also be that the Arizona program only covered people whose children were in public school the year before the program started, and our program allows for people who have been homeschooling their children all along to now take access, or have their children in private schools and now access these funds?
There may be some differences associated with that program, but we also looked at other eligibility criteria. If you look at the Arizona program, they had broader eligibility criteria in terms of the number of students who might be able to participate. So the programs obviously were not identical in terms of how they were put together, but that was the most similar program across the country that we could use to develop our models.
Under the statute, I understand that the the scholarship organization has to maintain an updated list of education service providers. And when I checked this morning, I saw that that list still says coming soon. Do you have any idea when that list will be available?
Yeah, so we've not actually made any awards to any of the families, so I assume that the list will be of eligible service providers will be updated simultaneous to making those funds available to the families.
I've been provided with a letter from the National Education Association of New Hampshire to you and Attorney General Formella dated August 5th requesting further clarification concerning HB2 as it relates to prohibitions on teaching certain concepts. They have not yet received a response. Do you have any idea when you would be able to respond to that request?
So 2 items relative to that. So I do know that the Attorney General's Office and the Department of Education, along with the New Hampshire Human Rights Commission, published some technical advisory that we made available to everyone in the state to be able to understand that law. And I as well know that I have been scheduled to speak with the NEA's Board of Directors. I think we were initially scheduled last month, and they had to postpone that.
So you're not anticipating a written response to that letter?
I've been invited to come speak with them, is my understanding.
So we are just hearing, this is my last question, we are just hearing that the welcome news that the FDA is recommending vaccines for 5 to 11 years old, and that those vaccines may soon be available for distribution. And will, as Commissioner Shibinette has said, that distribution will be hindered as a result of the lack of funding. Until we have vaccines available, public health officials advise that masking is the best protection to prevent the spread of COVID in schools. Dr. Chan actually noted that a school is 3.5 times more likely to have an outbreak without a mask mandate. Do you support the right of every school to make its own decision about masking requirements?
So I have been quite clear throughout this process that we believe that setting those health and safety policies are the responsibility of the local school boards.
So they can make mask mandate?
Well, so whether they can or not would be a question for the Attorney General, but we have supported local boards being able to make health and safety decisions for their communities.
Are you taking a position on vaccine mandate?
I am not taking a position. In others, I haven't been asked. So. Any questions on my contracts?
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of 94 through 97A, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. I now ask for a motion on agenda items 98 through 103 from the Department of Safety. Any discussion? Councilwoman? Okay, sure.
Good afternoon, Governor, honorable council members. For the record, Bob Quinn, Department of Safety.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Before I ask, I have a question about item number 101. But before I ask that, I just want to commend you on receiving Riverbend's Champion of Mental Health Award and for your commitment to working with the mental health community and engaging law enforcement so that we have better outcomes of law enforcement incidents that involve mental health. Thank you so much for your work in that area. My question regarding 101 is, will the purchase of these machines help address the backlog and fingerprints that haven't been done, license applications that are backing up as a result of it, and when can we expect that backlog to be resolved?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilor. So the first answer is yes. These 10 additional machines will enhance the ability of folks that need the background check to get it done. We're also going to look strategically to where we place them. Some are placed in police departments that they use them on a criminal arrest, but they also agree to do folks in their community who need employment. But I have some good news. At the last council meeting, I updated you with some numbers. In between that time and today, we have really focused on this because, we received the information that this was impacting nurses and LNAs that wanted to get to hospitals. So we put a lot of additional resources on this, and there's two areas that we had to address. It's the state record check, the criminal history, the CHRI, and then there's the APHIS, the fingerprint required background check that goes to the FBI. As of today, so the first part is to get the appointment. So on a phone call, we can get same-day or next-day appointments for a fingerprint check. If you go through the portal, which we are encouraging all the state agencies to use the portal, it's within 7 days. We have reduced the backlog of the state-only checks to 1,300. We anticipate having those done by the end of the week. And then we've reduced the backlog on the fingerprint checks to 500, which we also anticipate getting done end of week or within the next, I'd say, 7 to 10 days. After that, our goal is to keep this at 2 to 3 business days. But the most important thing I'd like to remind you on is we are shooting for first week in December to go live with the online ability to get the state check. So beginning in December, we'll have the ability to get the state check online as well as going through the portal for the fingerprint check. So I give the credit to the Colonel, Assistant Commissioner Edwards, that whole team in the background. They've been working because they know how much what we were not doing impacts people that are trying to get to work. So I think the future is bright.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Today we had a couple of contracts with regards to CDL funding for training and recruitment, and one of them was $1 million that we given to Women's Security, and I believe there's another large sum of money given to the DEA. I'm wondering, could you just update us on your kind of crosstalk with both of those agencies and how you're collaborating with regards to CDL?
Sure, and I think what we're doing is we're partnering when it comes to the recruitment, and I think DEA does a really good job of that. But on our contract here today, I mean, we're down 3,100 CDL licensed drivers. It's a big deal. So what this does is these dollars enhance the ability to have testing sites. We dealt with New Hampshire Motor Transport. Where do folks want to go to take the test? We strategically looked at Lebanon, Bethlehem, Hillsborough, Epping. We're collaborating with Commissioner Sheehan on how to enhance some sites that exist. We're going from 4 full-time CDL examiners to 8. So we want to make sure that we're going to, recruit more, that we have the ability, the locations to do it, and the examiners to give the test. Director Balicki's done a lot of work with this, and she's worked with the stakeholders external. We're even looking at a mobile unit, so when the folks come to do the test, they can be given a temporary license, so they don't have to go back to the DMV, and everything can be done right there. So I think this is going to be really well received by the CDL community.
Great, thank you very much, Commissioner.
Further discussion? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor? 98 to 103, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 104 through 107 from the Department of Justice.
Second.
We have motion second. Any discussion on any of these items? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And items 104 and 107 have been approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 108 to 111 from the Department of Administrative Services. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And those items have been approved. We have a table item from the Department of Administrative Services with a little bit of a caveat on the table item, but let's begin by asking for a motion to remove table item 107 from the table from DA. So a motion second. All in favor of removing item 107 from the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 107 is now removed. Could I get a motion to adopt agenda item 107? Motion? Is there a second to adopt? We have a second to adopt agenda item 107. I'm going to kind of immediately turn it right over to Councilor Kenny. I know this is not only the council put it on the table, but has provided some language that he would like to be introduced as part of the non-binding resolution along with this item.
Thank you, Governor. A couple of weeks ago, we tabled item 107. We really asked, the Commissioner of Admin Services to really have a dialogue with the City of Laconia, and for the City of Laconia to actually review the contract if they had any questions. Subsequently, I had some conversations, a series of 3 conversations with CBRB, Roger Geifer, who is the first vice president, point of contact on this contract, just to talk about concerns of the City of Laconia with regards, although he never shouldn't have, but he did. So I went to the City of Laconia on Monday evening, and I spoke to the City Council and the Mayor just to talk about the positive conversations I've had with this brokerage contract, I should say brokerage real estate firm, and they're wanting to work with all stakeholders, from Admin Services, the Governor, the Council, the City of Laconia, to obviously the Lakeshore Redevelopment Planning Commission, and all other stakeholders, because without that collaboration, they realized they cannot succeed with moving this forward. Additionally, at the City Council meeting, there was really support that this had happened, and I relayed to them because I've been involved in this for many years. This whole looking at the state property and seeing what we can do about it. So what the mayor did ask, just for language that would be more memorialized and indicate that there needs to be, collaboration with the City What we've done is put together a resolution, which I'll read for the record. Whereas in the spirit of cooperation and collaboration and acknowledgement of the significant interest, the City of Laconia has in the future development of the Laconia State School property, the select real estate marketing firm, currently CBRE, has encouraged the board of the EAS to regularly update Laconia City Council on all bona fide office on said property to Laconia City Council. In marketing Laconia State property, CBRE is encouraged to meet with the Lake Shore Redevelopment Planning Commission to establish a better understanding of the environmental, master planning, surveying, and other work already performed. CBRE is encouraged to provide updates on potential uses of the property to the Laconia Mayor and City Council, and is encouraged to work with the city staff to understand the planning and current use, regulations, and how they relate to the proposal. CBRE is encouraged to strive to ensure that all proposals identify the scope of development of the entire site to include rehabilitation or demolition of existing buildings, remediation of environmental concern issues, and if a residential component is proposed as part of the development, that the residential units be a mix of housing stocks with a variety of price points to encourage work towards housing. Lastly, CBRE is encouraged to express importance to any developer that they consider an identified recreational trail system as a part of their proposal, so that there continues to be multiple seasons of access to local parks and trail system. So the language that was presented to the council today is a way to reassure the city of Laconia that this particular brokerage real estate firm, if chosen today, to indicate that they will work with the city of Laconia. So I felt very confident speaking to Mr. Diker. The city of Laconia is reassured, and I would encourage the council to move forward on this contract.
Any further discussion?